"You will saddle Black Sovereign," Duke Edmund Ravenshire ordered. Caleb Ward stood between the champion stallion and the training yard. "The tendon is hot," Caleb said. "He should not run today." Beyond the stable doors, the Duke's guests waited beneath a white pavilion. Wealthy owners, journalists, and neighbouring nobles had gathered to watch the most expensive horse in England complete his final trial before the spring championship. Edmund stepped closer. "Are you refusing an order?" "I am refusing to put weight on an injured leg." The Duke glanced towards the other stable workers. Every groom lowered his eyes. "A stable boy cleans the stall. He does not advise the man who owns the horse." Caleb did not move. Edmund pulled the saddle from his hands. "You are dismissed. My father's employment has nothing to do with this. Your father works in a Ravenshire forge and lives in a Ravenshire cottage. By sunset, neither will be true." 5 years later, Edmund entered the same stable. The finest stalls stood empty. Every champion had been transferred to another trainer. He turned towards his remaining manager. "Where are my horses?" The man looked across the valley towards Caleb Ward's crowded training yard. "With the stable boy you said could be replaced." Caleb had been born behind the Ravenshire stables. His father, Thomas Ward, was the estate's chief farrier. His mother had washed saddle blankets until illness took her when Caleb was 12. After that, the stables became his home. He began with the lowest work. He carried water before sunrise, swept the passages, cleaned stalls and polished tack until the leather reflected the lantern light. He learned to sleep lightly because an unsettled horse could injure itself before anyone in the house heard the noise. Caleb was never formally taught to train horses. He learned by watching them. A horse shifting its weight from one front leg to the other was not being difficult. A stallion refusing grain, after a hard gallop, was not merely tired. A mare flattening her ears when the saddle was tightened might have pain beneath the girth. The animals could not explain themselves, so Caleb learned to notice what others ignored. Thomas taught him to inspect hooves and lower legs. "A horse cannot flatter a duke," his father said. "That is why men should listen when it refuses to run." Caleb remembered the lesson. The Ravenshire family did not. For 3 generations, the Ravenshire stables had produced winners. Portraits of famous horses filled the estate gallery. Silver cups occupied cabinets throughout the main house. Noble families sent their best young stock to Ravenshire because the name itself suggested victory. Duke Edmund had inherited that reputation. He had not inherited the patience that created it. He wanted faster results, more public victories, and higher breeding fees. Every promising horse was entered early. Every strong performance was followed by harder training. The workers noticed the change. Young horses returned from the track with swollen legs. Grooms were told to apply cold water and remain silent. Trainers who requested longer rest periods lost responsibility for the most valuable animals. Edmund called it discipline. Caleb called it borrowing from the future. No one asked what he called it. He was still the boy who cleaned the stalls. Black Sovereign arrived during a thunderstorm. The stallion was tall, nearly black, and difficult to handle. 2 men held the lead ropes as he came down the ramp from the transport carriage. Edmund watched from beneath an umbrella. "That horse will restore Ravenshire," he declared. The purchase price had been discussed across the racing world. Edmund had paid more than some estates earned in a year. Black Sovereign had speed, power, and an impressive bloodline. He also had a weakness in his left front leg. Caleb noticed it within the first week. The stallion placed less weight on the leg after fast work. The tendon became warm before visible swelling appeared. His stride shortened whenever the training ground was hard. Caleb mentioned it to the assistant trainer. The man examined the leg briefly. He is valuable enough to dislike work. Pain does not know what he cost. The trainer frowned. You are paid to groom him. Caleb began recording each change privately. He marked the temperature of the tendon, the distance of every gallop, and the condition of the ground. The pattern became clear. Black Sovereign needed rest. Edmund wanted a public trial. Thomas examined the horse the evening before the event. He ran one hand slowly down the leg. You are right. Will he tell the Duke? The veterinary surgeon has been invited to dine at the house. He has not examined the horse since yesterday. Then I will tell him. Thomas looked at his son. Be careful. If he runs, the tendon may tear. I said be careful. I did not say remain silent. The next morning, Caleb found the leg hotter than before. He refused to saddle the stallion. That decision cost both men their positions. Thomas received the dismissal notice while standing beside his forge. The estate steward demanded the cottage keys before nightfall. Thomas read the notice slowly. He was not a confident reader, but he understood enough. 32 years, he said. The steward shifted uncomfortably. I am following His Grace's instructions. I know. Thomas removed his apron and placed it over the anvil. The forge contained tools made by 3 generations of the Ward family. Most legally belonged to Ravenshire because they had been purchased through the estate. Thomas was permitted to take only his personal hammer, several pairs of tongs, and a small wooden chest. Caleb arrived from the stables carrying one bag. I am sorry. Thomas looked at him. Did you lie about the horse? No. Did you refuse because you wanted to embarrass the Duke? No. Then do not apologize for telling the truth. He took your work because of me. Thomas locked the chest. A house tied to silence was never ours. They loaded their belongings onto a borrowed cart. As they passed the training ground, a cheer rose from the pavilion. Black Sovereign had been brought outside. Another groom had saddled him. Caleb stood in the road and watched. The stallion entered the track unwillingly. His head remained high, and his stride uneven. The rider pushed him forwards. For the first quarter-mile, Black Sovereign moved with extraordinary speed. The guests applauded. Then the stallion shortened his stride. Caleb saw the change before anyone else. Stop him. No one heard. The rider drove the horse harder. Black Sovereign stumbled. His left leg folded beneath him, and he crashed onto the track. The cheering stopped. Caleb jumped from the cart and ran towards the horse. 2 guards blocked him at the gate. You are no longer employed here. He needs to stay down until the leg is secured. The Duke ordered you off his land. Beyond them, men were pulling at the reins, trying to force the frightened stallion to stand. Caleb shouted instructions. No one listened. Thomas seized his arm. We cannot help him from outside the gate. Caleb watched Black Sovereign struggle to rise. That image remained with him long after Ravenshire disappeared behind the road. The veterinary report confirmed severe ligament damage. Black Sovereign survived. He would never race again. Edmund called it an unpredictable accident. The public was told the horse had taken a bad step on uneven ground. Caleb's warning was never mentioned. Black Sovereign was moved to an isolated paddock behind the oldest stables, where visitors could not see him. Lord Henry Ravenshire, Edmund's only son, began visiting the horse in secret. Henry had watched Caleb's dismissal. He had also remained silent. Now he stood beside the injured stallion and understood what that silence had cost. Caleb and Thomas found work in a small town 50 miles away. Thomas rented a forge beside the coach road. Caleb sought employment at several racing stables. Each manager recognized his name. Edmund had sent letters. One owner told him directly, "No respectable stable hires a man who refuses his master's orders." Caleb answered, "Then it is fortunate I am looking for one that respects horses." He was shown out. Meadowbrook Stable accepted him because it could not afford to be selective. The property belonged to Silas Trent, a former jockey with an injured shoulder and more debt than horses. The fences leaned, the roof leaked. Most of the stalls contained animals other trainers had rejected. Silas looked at Caleb's worn coat. "What position did you hold at Ravenshire?" "Stable hand." "And why were you dismissed?" "I refused to saddle an injured horse." Silas studied him. "Was it injured?" "Yes." "Did the Duke know?" "He knew I believed it was." "That was not my question." Caleb met his eyes. "The horse fell before the trial ended." Silas nodded towards a broom. "You may begin with the West Passage." Caleb returned to cleaning stalls. Annabelle managed Meadowbrook's accounts. She was young, precise, and unimpressed by anyone who ignored arithmetic. On Caleb's first week, she found him changing the feed of a chestnut mare. "That mixture costs more," she said. "She is losing weight. She is also not racing. She will not race if she continues losing weight." Anna opened the ledger. "Then explain which expense you intend to reduce." Caleb looked at her. "Is that how decisions are made here?" "That is how the stable remains open." At Ravenshire, money had seemed endless. At Meadowbrook, every bag of grain mattered. Caleb learned quickly that good care required more than knowledge of animals. It required wages, schedules, contracts, and discipline. Anna taught him to calculate the cost of rest against the cost of permanent injury. Caleb taught her why a cheaper feed might become expensive when a horse could no longer work. They argued often. They also began improving the stable. Caleb's first year was not successful. One injured gelding never returned to racing. A mare developed breathing trouble despite treatment. 2 owners removed their horses after Caleb refused to enter them in early competitions. Silas nearly dismissed him when Meadowbrook lost another contract. "You are turning away the only people willing to pay us," Silas said. "They want exhausted horses to race. They own them. Ownership does not change the tendon." Silas rubbed his injured shoulder. "Principals do not pay rent. Neither do crippled horses." Anna stood between them with the monthly accounts. "The injury rate has fallen by half." Silas looked at her. "And the income?" "Still terrible." Caleb almost smiled. Anna continued, "But if the remaining horses stay healthy, we survive the winter." Silas gave Caleb one more season. Moorlight arrived in early spring. The horse was small, grey, and nervous. 3 trainers had rejected him. He resisted the starting gate, panicked in crowded yards, and exhausted himself before races began. His owner planned to sell him cheaply. Caleb watched the horse from outside the stall. Moorlight did not react strongly to shouting, carts, or banging doors. But when 2 men tried to force him through a narrow gate, he pulled backwards until he nearly fell. "He is not frightened of noise," Caleb said. Silas folded his arms. "He is frightened of racing. He is frightened of being trapped." Caleb changed everything. He stopped using the main training yard. Moorlight worked in open fields with an older gelding beside him. The starting gate was introduced gradually. First, the horse walked around it, then through it. Later, Caleb closed one side without locking the front. No whips were used. The sessions remained short. Anna objected to the time and expense. We have spent 3 months teaching one horse to stand still. We have taught him that standing still will not hurt him. That will not win a race. No, but fear will lose one. Morelight entered a minor country race at the end of the season. He started poorly. For most of the race, he remained near the back. Then the horses ahead began to tire. Morelight did not. He passed one, then two. He crossed the finish line first by less than half a length. Silas shouted louder than anyone in the crowd. Anna stared at the result board. Caleb went directly to the horse. He checked Morelight's breathing, legs and hooves before accepting a single congratulation. A journalist noticed. The following week, a small article appeared. Former Ravenshire stable boy trains unwanted horse to victory. Caleb disliked the headline. "I was not foolish when I cleaned stalls," he said. "I did not become intelligent when wealthy men noticed me." Anna folded the newspaper. "Then give them something better to write." Morelight won twice more. Other owners began visiting Meadowbrook. Caleb accepted their horses only under written conditions. No injured horse would race. Medical reports would be shared. Stable workers could stop a training session if they saw danger. No rider would be dismissed after one poor result. The names of grooms, farriers, and exercise riders would appear in the racing records. Some owners laughed and left. Others signed. Meadowbrook expanded. The roof was repaired. New stalls were built. Experienced workers arrived because they had heard Caleb listened when they spoke. 5 years after leaving Ravenshire, he became Meadowbrook's head trainer. Across the valley, Edmund's stable was moving in the opposite direction. After Black Sovereign, Edmund purchased more expensive horses. He demanded quick victories to restore the family's reputation. Young horses raced before they were ready. Grooms concealed swelling. Trainers reduced written reports because honest ones angered the Duke. Lord Henry objected repeatedly. "We are losing horses because no one dares tell you the truth." Edmund looked over the racing entries. "We did not build this stable by allowing laborers to dictate terms. We are destroying it by punishing anyone who disagrees." "You sound like Ward." He was right. The room fell silent. Edmund turned slowly. "You will not repeat that in my house." Henry looked towards the empty space where Black Sovereign's portrait had once been prepared. "It is true whether I repeat it or not. The season's largest race brought Ravenshire and Meadowbrook together. Edmund entered King's Dominion, a powerful colt from a celebrated bloodline. Caleb entered Morelight. Before the race, Edmund approached Meadowbrook's enclosure. His eyes moved from Caleb's worn training coat to the grey horse beside him. A pony trained by a stable boy cannot defeat Ravenshire blood. Caleb adjusted Morelight's bridle. Bloodlines do not run alone. Edmund's expression hardened. "You have built your reputation by avoiding difficult decisions. I make difficult decisions before they become permanent injuries." The bell called the horses to the track. King's Dominion took the lead immediately. Edmund had ordered the jockey to dominate from the start. The crowd roared as the Ravenshire colours moved ahead. Morelight remained several lengths behind. Anna stood beside Caleb. "Is he too far back?" "No." "How can you tell?" "He is still breathing comfortably." King's Dominion increased his lead around the second bend. Then his stride began to shorten. His early speed had consumed too much strength. Morelight moved forwards. One horse, then another. At the final turn, he drew level with King's Dominion. Edmund was shouting from the owner's stand. Caleb said nothing. Moorlight passed the Ravenshire colt in the final 100 yards. He crossed the line first. Meadowbrook erupted in celebration. Caleb did not raise his arms. He ran onto the track and reached Moorlight as the jockey dismounted. He placed both hands on the horse's legs, checking for heat or swelling. Only when he knew Moorlight was safe did he look towards the result board. Around him, wealthy owners watched. They had seen the difference. Edmund had looked at the finish line. Caleb had looked at the horse. By the end of the week, the first champion owner requested a transfer from Ravenshire to Meadowbrook. Then another followed, and another. The stable workers at Ravenshire began hearing the sound Edmund feared most. Not shouting, not accusation. Empty stall doors closing. Empty stall doors closing. At first, Edmund dismissed the transfers as temporary. One owner moved a promising mare to Meadowbrook after her groom reported swelling that Ravenshire's trainer had ignored. Another removed 2 young colts after learning they had been entered in races without his approval. A third demanded complete medical records. When the documents arrived with missing dates and altered descriptions, he cancelled every contract with Ravenshire. Edmund blamed Caleb. He is frightening owners with exaggerated warnings. Henry placed the incomplete reports on his father's desk. These came from our office. Workers make errors. Every error hides an injury. Edmund pushed the papers away. You are determined to embarrass this family. No. I am trying to discover whether there will be a stable left for me to inherit. There will always be Ravenshire horses. Henry looked through the window towards the yard. 3 of the finest stalls had already been emptied. A name cannot occupy a stall. Meadowbrook expanded carefully. Caleb refused to accept more horses than the staff could properly manage. Anna reviewed every new contract. We could double our income this season, Silas said, and double the number of injured animals if we work without enough people, Caleb replied. Silas pointed towards the waiting applications. Other trainers would accept them. Then those owners may choose other trainers. Anna closed the account book. We can build 12 new stalls without borrowing if we wait until autumn. Silas stared at both of them. You are the only successful people I know who argue against earning more money. Caleb looked towards the yard where Moorlight stood beside a nervous 2-year-old colt. We are earning trust. Money follows more slowly. He hired additional grooms before accepting additional horses. Every worker received written authority to stop a training session when a horse showed sudden lameness. Equipment appeared unsafe. The surface became dangerous. A rider reported loss of control. A tendon became unusually warm. The animal's breathing failed to recover normally. Some owners objected. Caleb did not alter the rules. Meadowbrook's horses began competing across the country. They did not win every race, but they completed more seasons without serious injury. That record became more valuable than a single championship. At Ravenshire, Edmund attempted to reverse the decline by buying another expensive stallion. The stable manager advised against it. Henry advised against it. The estate accountant warned that cash reserves were already low. Edmund purchased the horse anyway. He believed one major victory would bring every owner back. The stallion arrived with a history of breathing problems. The records were incomplete. Edmund entered him in a difficult race less than a month later. The horse finished badly and required months of treatment. 2 remaining owners removed their animals the following morning. The Racing Association transferred its annual autumn event away from Ravenshire, citing declining participation and inadequate veterinary oversight. The loss was more than financial. The race had carried the Ravenshire name for 54 years. Edmund received the decision while seated beneath portraits of his grandfather's champions. He read the letter twice, then he threw it into the fire. Burning the page did not restore the event. Henry visited Meadowbrook without announcing himself. Caleb was supervising a group of young grooms. When he saw Henry, his expression hardened. "What does your father want?" "He does not know I am here." "That has never protected anyone from the consequences of your family." Henry accepted the remark. "I came about Black Sovereign." Caleb stopped. "What happened?" "He is alive. His leg healed badly, but he can walk without pain most days." "Most days." "The cold affects him." "Who examines him?" "A local surgeon when my father approves the expense." Caleb's jaw tightened. Henry continued. "He is kept behind the old north barn. My father does not allow visitors near him, because an injured horse does not fit the family story." "Yes." Caleb looked towards Moorlight. "What are you asking?" "I want to move him here." "You do not own him." "I own a minority share through my mother's settlement." "That will not be enough. I can purchase the remaining share." "Your father will refuse." "Then I will sell my interest in Ravenshire's breeding stock and make the offer publicly." Caleb studied him. "Why now?" Henry did not defend himself. "Because I was silent when you warned us. Then I was silent when your family lost its home. I told myself I had no authority." "You had more than the people who were punished." "I know. That knowledge is not payment." "No." Henry looked towards the stable doors. "But perhaps it is where payment begins." Edmund refused to sell Black Sovereign. Henry informed the racing press that he intended to purchase the injured stallion and place him into permanent retirement. The story revived questions about the original accident. Journalists discovered that Caleb had warned Ravenshire before the trial. A veterinary assistant confirmed that the tendon had shown heat and swelling. Edmund could no longer describe the injury as unpredictable without being challenged. To avoid a public dispute with his son, he accepted Henry's offer. Black Sovereign arrived at Meadowbrook on a quiet winter morning. Caleb waited beside the transport carriage. The stallion emerged slowly. He was older, thinner, and cautious with his damaged leg. Caleb approached without touching him. For several moments, Black Sovereign watched. Then the horse lowered his head. Caleb placed one hand against his neck. "I am sorry," Henry said. Caleb continued examining the stallion. "You are apologizing to the wrong person." Henry looked at the damaged leg. "What must I do?" "You will begin by cleaning his stall." Henry thought Caleb was testing him. He was. "You want me to work here. You brought him. You will learn what his care requires." "I have never cleaned a stall." "That was once considered proof I knew nothing." Henry removed his coat. "Show me." Henry returned every morning. He carried water, prepared feed, and learned how to check Black Sovereign's leg. The workers did not address him as Lord Ravenshire. Caleb did not allow him to give orders. When Henry complained that a task seemed unnecessary, Thomas answered, "The horse does not care whether you understand the purpose. Do it correctly first. Ask questions after." Thomas had never forgiven the Ravenshire family, but he taught Henry because the horse deserved competent care. Over time, Henry stopped arriving in polished boots. He learned the names of workers he had once passed without noticing. He saw how every victory depended upon dozens of people who never appeared in official portraits. One evening he told Caleb, "I will not inherit the stable under my father's system. That is your decision. I want to rebuild it. That requires more than replacing your father with a kinder owner. I know. Caleb turned towards him. Do you? Henry looked across the Meadowbrook yard. Workers must have authority, not merely better treatment when the owner feels generous. Caleb said nothing, but it was the first answer Henry gave that sounded different from Edmund. Ravenshire reached its final crisis in early spring. The estate bank refused another extension. Without new training contracts, Edmund would have to sell the main stable complex. The land interested a property company that planned to demolish most of it and build private houses. For the first time, Edmund faced losing not only the horses but the institution that defined his family. He went to Meadowbrook. He arrived with a lawyer and a proposed contract. Caleb read the first page. The Duke offered him a large salary to become master trainer at Ravenshire. The agreement gave Edmund final authority over racing entries, breeding, and staffing. Caleb returned it. You still believe this is about hiring the right man? Edmund controlled his anger. What amount would satisfy you? Money is not the obstacle. I am offering more than any trainer in England earns, and reserving the right to overrule every decision that matters. The horses belong to me. Caleb looked towards Black Sovereign grazing in the lower field. That sentence ended his career. Edmund followed his gaze. I made one error. You built a system in which no one could stop you from repeating it. The lawyer began to speak. Caleb raised one hand. If Ravenshire wants a professional agreement, these are the conditions. Anna placed a prepared document on the table. It required independent veterinary examinations, complete medical records accessible to owners, authority for grooms and riders to stop unsafe training, no dismissal for reporting injury, housing contracts separate from employment, notice and compensation before worker eviction, shared prize bonuses for the full stable team, maximum training hours, a retirement fund for horses no longer able to race, permanent care for Black Sovereign funded by Ravenshire, no interference by Edmund in medical or training decisions. Edmund read the document with increasing disbelief. You would place stable boys above the owner? No. It places evidence above the owner. I will not surrender authority in my own house. Then you do not require my services. Caleb stood. The meeting ended. Henry confronted his father that evening. The bank will take the stable. I will find another trainer. No respected trainer will accept without medical independence. There are always ambitious men. There were always replaceable stable boys, too. Edmund looked at his son. You have been spending too much time with Ward. I have been spending time with the horse we destroyed. We? I watched. Henry placed his family signet ring on the desk. I will not inherit Ravenshire unless the conditions change. Edmund stared at the ring. You would abandon 3 generations of work? No. I refuse to preserve 3 generations of pride by continuing 1 generation's failure. Henry left the room. Edmund did not call him back. Several days later, Edmund returned to Meadowbrook alone. No lawyer, no carriage procession. Caleb found him near Black Sovereign's paddock. The stallion stood beneath a tree, calm and well-fed. Edmund approached the fence. Black Sovereign looked at him, but did not come closer. I purchased him to become the greatest horse Ravenshire had ever owned, Edmund said. Caleb remained silent. I paid more for him than my father paid for half the southern land. That did not make his legs stronger. No, the admission came quietly. Edmund watched the horse shift his weight. I destroyed his career, because I could not allow a stable boy to correct me. Caleb looked at him. You destroyed trust for the same reason. Edmund nodded. The bank will sell the stables unless contracts return, and you want me to save them. I want to accept your conditions. Because you believe they are right? Because I have run out of ways to avoid learning that they are. It was not a noble confession. It was honest. Caleb called Anna and Thomas to the paddock. Edmund signed the full agreement before them. He also signed compensation for the Ward family. Ownership of their former cottage transferred to Thomas. The old forge placed under Thomas's control. Protection for every current Ravenshire worker. Funding for Black Sovereign's lifetime care. A 3-year independent management contract with Meadowbrook. Caleb did not return as Edmund's employee. Meadowbrook would manage Ravenshire under its own standards. Edmund would remain the owner. He would no longer control the health decisions. The agreement had to be announced before the Racing Association and the owners who had withdrawn their horses. Edmund stood before them in the Ravenshire training hall. Many stalls behind him were empty. Caleb stood with Anna, Thomas, Henry, and several stable workers. Edmund read from a prepared statement. 5 years earlier, he would have ordered a servant to read it. This time, he spoke himself. Caleb Ward warned me that Black Sovereign was injured. I ignored him because I believed his position made his knowledge less valuable than mine. No one interrupted. The horse suffered permanent damage because of my decision. Edmund's voice tightened. I dismissed Caleb, dismissed his father, and removed their family from their home. That punishment was unjust. Thomas watched without expression. Edmund continued. Ravenshire concealed injuries, discouraged workers from speaking, and placed victories above the health of its horses. Under the new agreement, no owner, including myself, may overrule a medical decision. He signed the final public document. The Racing Association accepted the reforms. It did not restore Edmund as chairman. The annual Ravenshire race remained at another venue. Several owners refused to return. The apology did not erase the damage. It only ended his right to deny it. Ravenshire reopened gradually. Meadowbrook accepted responsibility for training, medical oversight, and staffing. Anna became financial director of both operations. She discovered Ravenshire had spent enormous sums purchasing horses while underpaying the people responsible for their care. The first budget she approved did not include a new champion. It included stable roof repairs, higher groom wages, medical equipment, safer training surfaces, worker housing improvements, retirement paddocks, additional rest days. Edmund objected to the cost once. Anna placed the old Black Sovereign medical report before him. He approved the budget. Thomas reopened the Ravenshire Forge as a training school. Young apprentices learned farriery, metalwork, and animal care. The cottage once taken from his family legally became his. Thomas did not move back. He used it to house apprentices whose families lived too far away. A home should not disappear because a worker speaks, he said. Henry remained at Meadowbrook for another year. He did not begin as Ravenshire's future master. He began as a groom. When he eventually returned to the family stable, the workers elected a representative council before accepting him into management. Caleb supported the arrangement. Trust should not be inherited, he told Henry. Neither should authority, Henry replied. Caleb considered the answer. Now you are ready to begin learning. Morelight retired after 2 more successful seasons. He did not become the most famous horse in England. He became one of the healthiest former racehorses at Meadowbrook. Caleb and Anna married quietly in the village church. They returned to work the following morning because a young mare was due to arrive. Silas complained that even marriage could not make Caleb take a holiday. Anna replied, "That is why I control the schedule." Caleb did not argue. Black Sovereign never raced again. He spent his remaining years in a wide meadow behind the stable. One afternoon, Edmund stood beside Caleb, watching a young colt move across the training field. The horse was fast. Everyone could see it. "Will that one become a champion?" Edmund asked. Caleb examined the colt's stride. "First, he will become healthy." Edmund looked towards Black Sovereign. Years earlier, he would have demanded a race date. Now he waited. The colt slowed and returned to his groom. The young worker touched one of its front legs, then raised a hand. "The tendon feels warm." The entire training session stopped. No one mocked him. No one threatened his home. Caleb crossed the yard to examine the horse. Edmund remained beside the fence. For the first time in Ravenshire history, the lowest worker in the stable had spoken, and the Duke's authority had yielded to the truth.